Hello readers, here is the fourth YouTube bringing to life characters from my autobiographic novels. This time I'm going to take you to Bog Hole, or Bog Hole as it was called in Horsley Woodhouse, which was also locally known as Horsley Woodhouse. Right, if you've read Lost Lad, you'll have met gorgeous Gary. Well now, in 1960s Michigan, we were teenagers together, but we had different friends. Alright? I liked odd, quirky folks. Gary was the opposite. He despised the effeminate, the fat, the ugly, the sick, the old, the poor, the narrow, the parochial, the ignorant, the untravelled, the unsuccessful, and the plain stupid. Which meant that he was none too keen to meet my relatives in Horsley Woodhouse. In the 1960s they were sort of stuck in a time warp. Well, decades before the 1960s actually. Gary admired the butch, the beautiful, the intelligent, the rich, the sophisticated. He hated my, as he called it, weird and wacky menagerie of creeps. What's wrong with normal people? How could you possibly have become bored with a gorgeous guy like Earl Vanderburg? For God's sakes, he looks like Rambo and lives at the top of the Jeffersonian, a view to die for. Ollie was saddened by my ongoing homesickness to get back to the beautiful hills and dales of Derbyshire. I wanted to visit my aunts and uncles in Horsley Woodhouse. Due to homosexuality, relations with my immediate family in Detroit had completely broken down, leaving, alas, irreparable estrangement. But we were good friends, and Gary agreed to join me on a holiday in England. Bog Hole. It sounds like a slum, doesn't it? But it wasn't a slum. It was a row of 6 terraced houses occupied by the Annables. The accommodation was simple, Victorian, 2 up, 2 down. It was built for coal miners years ago. Walking down the cobbles, we met Uncle Wilfred. He stared very hard at us. It was like, you know, it was just like we'd just landed and just walked out of a flying saucer. The familiar rude odling, well, it never failed to annoy me. Big, round, roomy eyes, a pouting lip, and an annoying silence seemed to shoot out a reproach from the cantankerous old man. Eventually he gave voice to his grievance. "Young come then?" I translated. "You have arrived at last." I'm being rebuked. I address Wilfred directly. "Hello, Uncle Wilfred, how are you?"
I think I'm if I were asked to shop me."
"Oh, I'm sorry to hear about that, Uncle Wilfred. You look fit enough to me."
"You did?"
"Oh, day? It's Sunday, isn't it?"
"I think Sunday. It's my birthday. I'm 84 today."
"Oh, congratulations, Uncle Wilfred. Oh, by the way, this is Gary. Hi, happy birthday." Well now, if you'll excuse us, we really must visit the other animals before it gets too late.
"And then they go for me?"
Gary looked puzzled, so I had to translate. "You need not go for me. Please don't leave on my account. It's pit talk from his coal mining days."
"You what?"
"I was just telling Gary that we'll have to be going, Uncle Wilfred." For a moment the sun went out. It was a shadow of a low-flying aeroplane. Oh, oh, I should love to be up in that. That was Aunty Joyce. She just joined us.
I'd sooner keep my feet on ground,
reproached Uncle Wilfred. Anyway, moving on, we were arrested by the sight of a toothless old woman sitting on a chair in front of number 3. Relatives often sat outside, on nice days, sat outside their front door. She stared at us, stared hard, through crumpled, screwed up, piercing bullet eyes. We were held by this silent leer, which was both inquisitive and interrogating. I mustered a cheerful, "Good morning, Auntie Nellie. How are you today?" No answer. I soldiered on. "Oh, meet my friend, Gary. He lives in America." A slight, sardonic nod, and a contemptuous grimace spread over her wrinkled face. Gary was repelled by this old hag, and he couldn't even bring himself to utter his usual cheerful "hi." No. So Nellie solved the embarrassing impasse by suddenly shooting out a spray of verbal bullets, as if from a machine gun.
Our Vivian were on wreck, and there were this lad who were going to hit our Vivian, and our Vivian says, "I've got a stick, I shall hit you."
As this came to an abrupt halt, we took a few seconds to absorb and decode it. Gary was particularly fascinated by her mouth. On the word "you" became a perfect circle. Anyway, I made polite apologies and we moved on. We moved on to the house of Aunty Joyce. She was standing outside and she said,
"Shall you come in and have a bit of tea with me?"
Now Joyce was a lifelong spinster. She'd always been very nervous of strange men. The physical nearness of a tall, unknown, handsome blonde was a challenge to Joyce. Each time Gary addressed her, she sort of averted eye contact and she looked down at this filthy old peg rug in front of the fire. It's been made years ago from bits of coloured rag. Quite common in those days, peg rugs. Anyway, 3 tiny cakes and 3 cups of lukewarm stewed tea concluded the sparse meal. Small talk had run its course, and the conversation gradually dried up, leaving long, embarrassing pauses. During one of these silences, Joyce looked up through the window and eased the tension with a slow and easy The bird moved. "Nice parakeet," said Gary. "We call it a budgerigar," I said. Said Aunty Joyce. Suddenly, the tinkle of a bell. To the rescue came Joey. All eyes turned on the little budgie who had cleverly rang his bell and provided this delightful distraction.
"Hello, Joey. Are you showing off? Joey, Joey, Joey,"
repeated a delighted Aunty Joyce. She pushed her face up close to the cage and pursed her lips and made a kissing sound. It revolted Gary. He tried hard to maintain a half smile to suggest pleasure at such charming behaviour when his mischievous friend said, "Joey, Joey, Joey, look at Joey, Gary." "I can see Joey," he said through his teeth. He was furious. Anyway, we were all rewarded by a single chirp, a cocked head on one side, and a second peck of the bell. Now then, at that moment, the show became really interesting. When Joey did his party trick, he put his little head under the bell, giving the amusing appearance of wearing a hat. Aunty Joyce twittered and chuckled,
hat on, Joey. Joey, 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 look, Narvel. Joey's got his hat on.
And so on. Anyway, back on the cobbles, I said, oh, you must meet my favourite aunt, Aunty Gertie at number 2. Spare me, said Gary, spare me. I can't take any further Annables. Oh, come on, Gary. I said, I think you'll like her. She's a highly entertaining harridan, the sharp-tongued matriarch of the Annable clan. So I got him to go in, and entering number 2, well, nobody knocked, you just walked in. That's what happened in those days in coal mining areas. You walked in, and on the floor there were several little kiddies crawling around on Aunty Gertie's spotless floor. Very clean, that was important in those days. Anyway, Gertie's living room was always full to overflowing with a humanity of Annables, fussing, doting, cooing at their little ones. She was generous, Aunty Gertie. The kettle was always on the boil, supplying an endless supply of tea for the multitude.
Mash 'em some tea, Alfred,
she bawled out. 2 mugs arrived, and Gary tried to look grateful for the tea he didn't want. But the homemade fruitcake, well, that was delicious.
Here, get the chops round that,
ordered Aunty Gertie, thrusting a plate at her grinning nephew, because I was always amused.
That's like a bloody Cheshire cat.
I liked Aunty Gertie. Her entertaining banter was a real treat. She sounded and looked like a typical battle axe. At 81, with robust health, she was still going strong, bossing, dominating and intimidating as well. I said, well, I knew how to get her going, so I said, mischievous buttons I used to press, you know, and I said to her, oh, I said, we've been talking to Joey, he put his hat on for us.
Bloody hell! Bottom middle at table, what must your friend think?
Oh, it was different, said Gary, cautiously, slightly intimidated by the crowd in that small room. Aunty Gertie continued her assault on Aunty Joyce.
No else to do but talk to Bud all day. Bloody pathetic, silly old bugger. Old-fashioned as Methuselah. Oh, what must you think, Gary? And you from America where it's all posh.
Crowded that room may have been, but there was plenty of room for the elephant in the room. They all knew that nephew Narvel, he couldn't kick a football, couldn't knock down a pint of beer, couldn't defend himself with bare knuckles, and worse, much worse, he couldn't fancy a lass. And Gary felt the same. He had issues with his own family. Accordingly, like me, he needed a change and a bit of gay company perhaps, and expressed a desire to move on away from Horsley Woodhouse, and we went to Belper, where we met the washed-up drag-act Betsitch Betty, who lived there, Betsitch Lane. Betty's small room had a comfortable quaint simplicity, darkened by heavily curtained windows. A blazing fire, very comfortable, shot out a warm orange glow. Nice fire, complimented Gary.
Could be better,
replied our host.
Woodside hard, cheap coal, like trying to burn bloody slate, grey as me granny's hair.
Once more I was mesmerised by her mouth,
which seemed to move all round his face. Yeah, that loose bitch next door, she gets Darby Bright's best coal for note. She's filthy, filthy. I sat behind her at bingo, you know, you could have grown bloody taters in her neck.
This lass precipitated a tirade against Betty's neighbours and his personal assessment of the social scene of Lower Betsitch Lane.
She stands to go on about my morals. She's a bloody coalman, dustman, not for a tart, dirty car. You know what? She's had more prick than a second-hand dartboard. Yeah, criticising me. I cut off head of all the daffodils. That's what I bloody did. That'll learn her, calling me to that dotty bugger other side. You know, him as keeps piddling his bloody dotty toes. Huh. And they're filthy kids. They stink. Yeah. They run round with their knickers dropping down, and that fat lass, one tooth black, one wobbling. Hey, what's up with him? Well, once again, I was breathless with laughter. It was a splendid performance. However, yes, we took note. Betty, when crossed, was capable of a spiteful act, vandalising the garden of a neighbour. Anyway, the old queen ranted on. Can't keep her bloody legs closed. Gary looked suitably shocked. Big family, yes. All ignorant as pigs. She feeds them, she feeds them boiled bones, Oh, wow, and little un, like a bloody monkey, he's enjoying them bones, she says. And Grandma sitting there, the old bugger, old bloody daft old bugger, 3 sheets tip wind, red face, piddling scabs on her legs, veins sticking out, 6 bloody chins. Well, Gary had had enough of my weird and wacky friends and relatives. At the end of our UK holiday, he'd met sneering snobs, he'd met Dolly, Dobby the gnome, met the Belper crone, the toad, he'd met Guzzly Grandad and Gutter Gobbler, etc., etc. Yeah. Well, Bog Owl or Belper, no, not for Gary. He yearned for the fleshpots of London, Paris, New York, San Francisco. To conclude, a tribute to Joyce. Why did we get on? Well, it's because we had a lot in common. We were the butt of family jokes, the unmarried, the old, the odd, the childless. We shared this indignity. It brought us together. She liked me, she respected me. When I became a teacher, she was proud of me. You know what? That meant everything.